The European Union is at crossroads with the upcoming Hungarian elections. Is it going to indirectly contribute to further democratic backsliding by allowing yet another unfair election to take place? Or is it going to take a firm stance against autocratic trends? In any case, the attacks on the freedom of media put European democracy under pressure. How will the EU ensure that media literacy is respected and upheld in all of its member states?
Hello, Balázs. I so much agree with you, and I don't know exactly what to tell you and to answer to you. And this is not because I'm not myself working on the topic very much, and it's not either because a lot of people in this parliament are very, very engaged. And in various groups, it's a very shared concern, and people are very well aware in this parliament of the situation in Hungary, the systemic deterioration, and must I recall it, the parliament was the one that really alerted everyone on this, and since years, a decade in fact. And I have strong allies here that want us to put an end to it, and trying to push Commission and Council also to act. But you must know that Council is functioning on the unanimity problem, and also the Commission is sometimes not courageous enough because they need to accommodate everyone, and that's the walls we are going into all the time. So we are doing our best, and it's not just a word I'm saying there. I'm going to Hungary for the day of the election. We will do an interim report in Parliament just after. We will do actions, and we will say how grave this is for European Union, because indeed it's not just about Hungary. The fact that Hungarian citizens are left to themselves is already very unfair. But to be honest, if tomorrow we have in the European Union a member state that has clearly fallen into autocracy, which will be the case probably if Orbán wins again, I really don't see where the meaning of Europe will be anymore, and this will put us all in danger.
Well, this is a very important question because the distortion of the Hungarian media goes back to over a decade, and indeed, in a way, media pluralism has been pushed back, and there is a strong concentration of media outlets, not only the public but also in the private sector, in the hands of the ruling party and various actors around that. How this could change? Well, not very quickly, I'm afraid, because there are entrenched structures in both the public and the private sector. And let's be honest, the European Union has not been very forceful or efficient to protect media freedom in Hungary. Probably some kind of cooperation can be created to build up media which is more objective and changes the patterns of the last few years.
War is back in Europe, and in these terrifying days it has become even clearer how important it is for Europeans to stay united. What do you think about a common European defense policy to protect people and avoid other wars on the continent? Don't you think that what's happening in Ukraine right now is making everyone realize the importance of peace and democracy, the importance of European solidarity? Don't you think the time has come to really commit to establish the rule of law in Hungary?
I agree with Robin that there is probably a connection between the strengthening of the defense and security aspects of the European Union on the one hand, and on the other hand, to protect the rule of law within EU member states, because otherwise there is a credibility gap. Europe has to sustain and strengthen its values and invest in maintaining and spreading these values, which are about standards of democracy and human rights and respect to minorities, and very importantly the rule of law, which suffered in countries like Hungary or Poland, but not exclusively. And in this field, I suppose there has been a lot of important action, like the so-called rule of law mechanism to protect at least the EU budget, but probably more could be protected. And whenever the discussion comes to further enlargements of the European Union, whether we look at the Western Balkans or we look at the Eastern neighborhood, it's very important that the European Union can demonstrate that we are also inside the EU protecting high standards and push back those who would violate or undermine the rule of law, because otherwise you cannot expect countries with the aspiration of EU membership to converge on these high standards.
I do think I'm a federalist, so I do think that Europe tomorrow should be much more common integration for a lot of topics. Not everything, you need subsidiarity, but there are a number of things where we could do progress. Once again, as I said, the problem of unanimity is a huge problem. On common defense, I think it's needed, but I also would be very, very unhappy if this common defense meant that countries like France, for example, go on putting a lot of money for French defense, and on the top goes, does a bit of common defense. Common defense means that everyone then stops to have its own military big expenses, and everyone stops and everyone thinks together. If not, it's just will be chaotic. That's for one thing. On the other thing, the rule of law on Hungary, it has to be reinstalled. I don't know how it is possible today without a strong sign of the council. Maybe the people of Hungary themselves are going to change the situation on this Sunday, and then they would be very, very strong and brave people, because to be honest, they have not been helped that much. We have managed to have a full-scale mission of observation of the elections, which is something that we don't usually do in elections in European Union, because we do consider that they're fair. In this case, we didn't. So there was arguments to have this fully fledged mission, but honestly, that's the only thing that we really did. We didn't fight against the lack of media pluralism enough. We didn't fight against the disinformation. And so hopefully the people of Hungary will change things themselves on Sunday by themselves. And if it's not the case, then we will be a lot here fighting and struggling like we've been doing to go on and try to act on all sorts of targets. Go on the Article 7 procedure so that Hungary gets harsh recommendations from the other countries, having the rule of law conditionality mechanism put in place so that they don't get the recovery fund directly for the government, but that it goes elsewhere, and all the infringements procedures in Commission that goes on as they should do.
Hello, I would like to know what will happen if the opposition led by Markit Peter wins the election. Will Hungary really turn its back on Russia and favor NATO, or is just a campaign speech by the candidate? Thank you.
I cannot answer your question because this is internal politics and I'm not an Hungarian. What I can tell you, if the opposition wins, is that it will be, for us, the direction to take to really work even more, I would say. It can seem a paradox that even if the opposition win, we still will be pushing. But yes, we will, because it's not just the prime minister question, it's also this two-third majority in parliament and all the constitutional changes that has completely changed the landscape of democracy in Hungary, which is no more democracy, whoever the prime minister is. And so they will need pushes and a lot of influence of European Union to change all of this, even if the opposition win. And of course, one of the things that will be asked is to stop the disinformation about, for example, the Ukraine war, but more generally about what is happening often in Russia, because Hungary is a place where there is too much disinformation about Russia, indeed. And there will be also a lot of pushes and all of this to say to Hungary, you must join more and more of our European structures, institutions, and go on our side. One example is the general prosecutor. Hungary is one of the member states that is not coming to share people with the public prosecutor of European Union. This is very important to fight against corruption. So this is something that we will ask. The NATO question will stay a political national debate, and I am not supposed to push on one way or another on this. But on European values, I can be very clear.
I would not use the expression turning our back on Russia or China. I would underline the intention to align Hungary on the European Union mainstream. This is the strong message of Peter Márki-Zay. And it also means introducing the euro, which most of the EU members have done, joining the EU prosecutor, which most of the EU members have done, but unfortunately not Hungary. So a strong commitment to the main thrust of the European Union integration is what you should hear from the program of Mr. Márki-Zay, and it also stretches to questions like social rights, because the recent Hungarian government, they introduced the so-called slave labor law, for example, which contradicts the spirit of the Pillar of Social Rights, and you could speak about many other aspects. There are some specific issues of Russian and Chinese relations which have been questioned and will be if Mr. Márki-Zay becomes Prime Minister. And these are linked to specific deals. For example, the extension of our nuclear power plant or building a Budapest-Belgrade railway. One of them is Russian, the other one is Chinese investment, and these have been doubted mainly because there is no compelling evidence of the need for these investments, and there is a suspicion of corruption, unfortunately, around these projects as well.
How would the opposition counter Viktor Orban's disinformation campaign if elected, and how would they work together on that?
Well, we already spoke about media freedom and the importance of media pluralism, and that requires a more even-handed approach from the media authority, and also ensuring that there is a balanced appearance of government and opposition in the state media, which has not been the case in Hungary. On the other hand, there are further important points, which is education, 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 and ensuring that high standards of education and culture represent an inspiration, and there is more investment in learning foreign languages in Hungary, for example, and increasing the number of years the young pupils spend in education in Hungary. And that, of course, would also allow for a more enlightened political dialogue in the country as well.
I think already during the campaign, this I can say, the opposition party have shown that they are not trying to disinform, and that they are trying to be as honest as possible to the citizens. For example, they are a platform of very, very different parties, and this is an unknown thing that we cannot even imagine in other of our member states. Such a large scale of parties coming together, and they did not hide their differences, but they did say that rule of law and anti-corruption and coming back to a healthy democracy is overall the most important thing, and that's why they did it together. So I think on this we can trust them, but of course we will be as careful in Hungary as we are in other countries. The question of disinformation is something that is now very much on the agenda of the European Union. It is very clear that we have been too naive, and that a lot of disinformation has been said in European Union, coming from China, from Russia. I work a lot on gender disinformation, and a lot of things awful have been saying on gender, and we should have fight against it before. So we will go on doing it. In Hungary, like in other countries, I don't think this is a problem at all. But then what is today the most important thing to do in Hungary is to reinstall media pluralism. The fact that all of the media belongs to oligarchs that are close to Orban is one of the first problems. The fact that we have no transparency on how things are decided all the money goes for these oligarchs, medias that say only the Hungarian narrative, the fact that the opposition is never invited to debate, and the fact that also the narrative itself has become completely untrue. I often say this, and I will finish on this example, that when we were there for a mission coming from the European Parliament, representing all the political groups in this parliament, we were 5 women, and we were coming from 5 different groups, from the left, from the socialists, from Renew, from the Greens, and from the Conservative. And all of us, we were described in media like crazy women, leftist liberals. There's no more place today in Hungary for nuances, for democratic debate, for interesting info, and this has to be reinstalled.